There is a moment in every business decision when the math stops working. For TNT Sports, that moment arrived sometime during the Unrivaled season when the ratings came in and the numbers told a very uncomfortable story. Let's establish what actually happened here. TNT Sports made a significant financial commitment to Unrivaled, the 3-on-3 women's basketball league based in Miami. The investment came with an implicit understanding. This league would deliver star power, and star power in women's basketball right now means one name: Caitlin Clark. Clark said no. She chose not to participate in Unrivaled. And without her, TNT was left holding a broadcast deal for a league that could only attract a narrow segment of hardcore WNBA fans, not casual sports viewers, not international audiences, the niche within a niche. The ratings reflected exactly that. Not catastrophic, but not remotely close to what a major television network requires to justify prime broadcast slots and production investment. Now here is where the story takes an important turn. TNT did not walk away from women's basketball. They pivoted. They acquired exclusive U.S. broadcast rights to FIBA's men's and women's tournaments in a multi-year deal. Coverage begins March 5th with the 2026 FIBA Women's Basketball World Cup qualifying tournament, airing across TNT, True TV, and HBO Max. And this time, Caitlin Clark is actually playing. That is not a coincidence. That is a network correcting course in real time. TNT could not buy Clark's participation in Unrivaled, but they can broadcast the United States national team, and Clark is on that roster. So is Paige Buchers, Angel Reese, Chelsea Gray, Kelsey Plum, and several others making their senior national team debuts. TNT did not build a league around one player and lose. They simply found a different vehicle for the same player. The strategy changed. The objective did not. 5 games, 12 days. One very deliberate broadcast strategy that tells you exactly how much confidence TNT actually has in this product. Here is the schedule. March 5th, USA vs. Senegal on True TV and HBO Max. March 6th, Puerto Rico vs. USA, same platforms. March 9th, USA vs. Italy, again on the streaming side. March 15th, New Zealand vs. USA, still not on TNT proper. And then March 17th, the finale, Spain vs. USA. That one lands on TNT. Read that progression carefully because it is not random. TNT buried the first 4 games on True TV and HBO Max. Only the final qualifying game gets the flagship network slot. What that tells you is that TNT is running a controlled experiment. They want to see whether Caitlin Clark can move the needle for international basketball before they commit their primary broadcast real estate to it. If those early numbers are strong, the March 17th Spain game becomes a showcase event. TNT will promote it aggressively, put their best production around it, and use it as proof that their FIBA investment was sound. If the early numbers are soft, they can absorb the result quietly. Streaming numbers are easier to manage from a public relations standpoint than a primetime TNT broadcast that underperforms. This is not a criticism of TNT. This is smart, risk-managed broadcasting. They learned from Unrivaled. They are not overcommitting before they have data. But here is the tension that makes this genuinely interesting. While these FIBA qualifiers are airing, Unrivaled games are still being broadcast on TNT's platforms. The same network is simultaneously running a league it funded, and a tournament that features the exact players that league could not fully deliver. Every rating comparison that gets made over these 12 days is going to be unfavorable to Unrivaled. TNT is not just testing FIBA. They are, perhaps unintentionally, running a side-by-side evaluation of 2 very different women's basketball products. And the results of that comparison are going to shape decisions that extend well beyond this qualifying tournament. Aliyah Boston will not compete in the FIBA World Cup qualifiers. The Indiana Fever's starting center, the 2023 #1 overall draft pick, and Caitlin Clark's primary pick-and-roll partner was selected for Team USA. She was supposed to be there, then Unrivaled happened. The official statement from the Fever is brief and deliberately vague. Right lower extremity injury sustained during Unrivaled competition. She is returning to Indianapolis for further evaluation. Right lower extremity is medical language designed to tell you something without telling you anything. It could be her foot, it could be her ankle, it could be her knee. The severity of each of those scenarios is dramatically different, and the Fever are not clarifying. That vagueness is itself a signal. When organizations are comfortable with an injury timeline, they tend to be more specific. When they are not, you get language like this. What we do know is the context. Boston got hurt in February during the offseason playing compressed 3-on-3 basketball in a league that exists outside the WNBA structure. Her body had roughly 3 months to recover from a full WNBA season and playoff run before Unrivaled began. That is not adequate recovery time for a professional athlete playing at high intensity. The original pitch for Unrivaled was straightforward. Come play during the offseason, earn additional income, stay competitive. maintain your conditioning. On the surface, that is a reasonable proposition for players who feel underpaid in the WNBA, and many of them genuinely are underpaid relative to their male counterparts. But the model has a structural flaw that this injury exposes directly. The offseason exists for a reason. It is not dead time. It is when professional athletes rebuild their bodies, address chronic pain, and prepare for the demands of a long regular season. Replacing that recovery window with a high-intensity competition league does not keep players sharp. For some, it puts them at risk. Boston is now the clearest example of that risk becoming reality. And the Indiana Fever as an organization have every reason to be deeply frustrated. They selected her first overall. They built their defensive identity around her rim protection. They have invested years of development resources into her growth as a player. None of that investment was made with the expectation that she would enter the WNBA season compromised by an injury sustained in a league the Fever have no contractual relationship with and no control over. That is the part of this story that deserves more attention than it is getting. There is a dimension to Aliyah Boston's injury that goes beyond missing a tournament. It connects directly to the most consequential business negotiation in women's basketball right now, and the timing could not be more complicated. The WNBA Players Association opted out of the collective bargaining agreement in 2024. That decision opened the door to a potential work stoppage before the 2025 season begins. A lockout or a strike is not guaranteed, but it is a real possibility that both sides are navigating carefully. Now consider what that means for a player who got injured in Unrivaled. Under a standard WNBA contract, the Fever organization covers everything: medical staff, physical therapists, training facilities, rehabilitation equipment, nutritional support. The entire infrastructure of professional sports medicine is available to Boston as long as she is an active employee of the franchise. If there is a lockout, that relationship is suspended. Players are technically no longer employees of their teams during a work stoppage. The organizational support structure that every professional athlete depends on for recovery does not follow them out the door. Boston would then need to source and fund her own medical care, her own rehabilitation specialists, her own facilities. All out of pocket, for an injury she sustained in a league that has no formal obligation to cover her long-term recovery costs beyond whatever insurance provisions exist in her Unrivaled contract, the details of which are not public. This is not a hypothetical concern manufactured for dramatic effect. This is a real financial and medical vulnerability that exists at the intersection of a labor dispute and an off-season league injury. And it raises a legitimate question about the risk calculation players are making when they sign up for leagues like Unrivaled. The money Unrivaled offers is real. For players earning WNBA salaries that most professional athletes would consider modest, that additional income matters. But professional sports organizations provide compensation that goes far beyond the salary line. Medical coverage, rehabilitation access, and facility support represent significant financial value that players only fully appreciate when it is no longer available. If there is a work stoppage and Boston is managing a lower extremity injury without the Fever's medical infrastructure behind her, Unrivaled's compensation looks considerably less attractive in retrospect. The next collective bargaining agreement will almost certainly include conversations about off-season league participation. WNBA owners are watching this situation. If their first overall draft pick enters the season less than fully healthy because of an injury sustained in a league they have no jurisdiction over, the argument for contractual restrictions on off-season participation becomes significantly stronger. That would effectively end leagues like Unrivaled, not through public criticism, through contract language. Step back from the individual storylines for a moment, because what this situation actually represents is a stress test of the entire economic model surrounding women's basketball, and the results of that test are not encouraging for certain parts of that ecosystem. Unrivaled was built on a premise that WNBA players are undervalued, underexposed, and capable of generating significant revenue if given the right platform and the right financial structure. That premise is not wrong. The underlying argument is legitimate. WNBA players are underpaid relative to the revenue their sport is beginning to generate, and the gap between their salaries and their actual market value is a real structural problem. But Unrivaled's execution revealed something important. The revenue generation that women's basketball is experiencing right now is not broadly distributed across the sport. It is heavily concentrated around a small number of individual players and one player in particular. Without Caitlin Clark, Unrivaled could not deliver the ratings TNT needed. Without Caitlin Clark, the FIBA deal would not carry the same broadcast urgency. Without Caitlin Clark, this entire conversation looks different. That is a fragile foundation for any business model to rest on. The FIBA qualifiers beginning March 5th will tell us something meaningful about the scope of that drawing power. International basketball does not carry the rivalries, the storylines, or the playoff stakes that make the WNBA compelling viewing. USA versus Senegal does not have the same narrative weight as Indiana Fever versus New York Liberty in a deciding playoff game. The casual viewer who tunes in for Caitlin Clark in a WNBA context may not follow her into a qualifying tournament against teams most American sports fans have never thought about. If the ratings are strong, TNT's pivot looks intelligent and Clark's appeal is confirmed as genuinely cross-contextual. If the ratings are modest, it suggests that Clark's drawing power is partially dependent on the competitive context around her, which is a more complicated finding with significant implications for how leagues and networks plan around her. For Unrivaled specifically, the path forward is narrow. They are currently competing for attention against Team USA basketball on the same network platforms. They cannot match that scale. Their best-case scenario is surviving this season with enough financial stability to renegotiate their broadcast structure before year 3. Their worst-case scenario is that the combination of soft ratings, high-profile injuries, and WNBA labor negotiations creates conditions where players, teams, and networks all quietly step back from the concept simultaneously. And for Aliyah Boston, the immediate question is straightforward. How serious is this injury? How long is the recovery? And will she be ready when the WNBA season opens in May? The Indiana Fever's 2025 season does not look the same without her at full health. Her development alongside Caitlin Clark was one of the genuine bright spots of last season, and that partnership matters to everything Indiana is trying to build. The broader lesson here is not that off-season leagues are inherently wrong, or that players should not seek additional income. The lesson is that the economics of women's basketball are still being figured out in real time. The money is arriving, but the structures to manage it responsibly, protect player health, and distribute opportunity beyond a single transcendent talent have not caught up yet. March 5th is not just the start of a qualifying tournament. It is a data point in an ongoing argument about what women's basketball is actually worth, who it belongs to, and how sustainable the current moment really is.